Okay, so people can raise hands if they want to say something, share something, and for people that are unfamiliar with Zoom, you have to click on the participants button, and then you'll see a raise hand button somewhere. And so if you raise your hand, I will see it, everybody will see it. And yeah, and I see the first one, Nea, if I pronounce it well. And yeah, you are muted and you can go ahead.
Cool. Yeah, Neha. Whoa, why did that make my face so big? Yeah, so I wanted to share something that actually came up in the first and second session. So Anna and Ellen, I'm going to share a little bit of what we talked about. So we sort of reflected that the session felt very abstract and meta, and it was really beautiful from a systems thinking point of view. And there was some discussion around how one might view that and feel a little bit unclear on what their role is in that. And one thing that came up was so Joe, I don't know if I can share my screen, but Joe has this incredible slide where you start with backyard permaculture, then regenerative farms, eco-villages, and you sort of see where you are. Oh, it looks like I can share. You see where you are on this sort of path. And this tied really nicely into the second question that was asked, which was, well, I don't remember the question verbatim, but it tied nicely into the second question that our breakout groups went into. But we thought, wouldn't it be cool if you're at the backyard permaculture stage and you identify that that's where you are, it would be awesome to have some sort of like list of actions associated with this. So here's how to be in this phase. And also here's how to take action to level yourself up to get into the next phase, and then this phase, and this phase, and this phase. So just sort of like an associated doc or something. And this tied really nicely into the next breakout session. So you all probably planned this really well. But so what could we do in this study group? Well, I think the study group could actually create a living document that went along with each of these phases. And I know so many of us are already working on a lot of these things. So that was sort of like a really coherent arc that came up in our discussions. And yeah, that's really only the feedback that I wanted to share. I'm sure Ellen or Anna or Ross, and I'm trying to find all the faces, Tara and Chad, if there was anything else that I missed, feel free to chime in, but that was what I wanted to share.
Thank you, Neha. Yeah, very interesting. I think these feedbacks and sharing are really useful, and to figure out, I think, how this study group can evolve. And I don't see anyone else raise their hand. Norman? Yeah, please.
So really interesting, because if we're going to start with backyard permaculture, I don't know if you could do this, Diego, because you're really good at these polls. We have about 20 some odd people on the call. Is it possible for you to take a poll to see how many of these people have ever actually taken a permaculture course?
So to do the poll here, it's a little bit, I have to open another page, but maybe people can reply on the chat. So if you have taken the permaculture course, you can write it on the chat to reply to the question. Norman?
Yeah, so my advice would be that if we're going to start to do backyard permaculture, we should all take a permaculture course. That would be, that would be square one.
Thank you, Norman. So next one is Anna, and you can unmute yourself.
Yes, I was in the breakout with Neha, and just wanted to add about this sort of follow-up session, which I find really helpful. We started getting to this really great conversation about, how would we where do we find ourselves on this graphic? And then it was unfortunate that we didn't come back to the same group. And I just wanted to add and ask if anyone else feels the same way, that it'd be nice if, like, it was a pleasure to meet all the other people that I spoke with, absolutely. But 15 minutes is so short, and I don't feel like I really get to connect to people in just 15 minutes. It would have been nice to have been able to return to the same group of people to reflect and question, or different questions with the same people.
Thank you. Yeah, the other time someone said that they would prefer to go to different groups. So maybe, yeah, we can maybe do once in a way and the other way.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, thank you. So Ross, I muted you. And you have
okay. Thanks, Diego. I was going to say very similar actually to Anna. And I think that in the very first session, I was definitely one of the people who said it's nice to change room and get to speak to some other people. But at the same time, yeah, I feel that, yeah, sometimes you feel like your conversation gets cut short. I suppose the middle ground, as I would see it, is that those are springboards for further conversations. You know, so you have that conversation, and I suppose I'm saying I still like the fact that we change rooms and change groups, because it then gives me, after the session, I can think, well, that was an interesting conversation that we were having there, and maybe I'd like to pursue that a bit further with those people. And you can follow it up in, you know, like through the forum, and then arrange your own conversations around that.
Yeah, great idea.
Yeah, Diego, could I say something here real quick, because it seems relevant. Part of my, like, you know, megalomania vision for this work is that we make most universities completely irrelevant and bypass them. And so I say that with all seriousness, because so many of us are already very well educated, but we're not learning what we need to actually learn to save humanity from extinction. And most of that learning is in practice. And so we need to learn how to do projects together, to gather the research and knowledge we need to do the practice, and just be frickin' practicing. Like, we need to be regenerating. And so I say that because the way that we're doing this now is we're doing this little prototyping. Every 2 weeks there's a webinar, and then there's a 90-minute Zoom session. But what if we start to bring coherence to the learning across all of the different people doing this work? We actually can start to do all this, and no one pays any money. You don't have to. You don't have to go in debt, because all of us are doing valuable things. And so we're participating in regenerative economies. And I just wanted to name that, because this prototyping stage, we can't really choose one or the other much, because we're just figuring it out. But we'll start to have lots of parallel threads and streams and support for making this happen, become like an online university without anyone building an organization. By the way, I'm not promoting the idea that I'm trying to create an organization. I'm actually anti-organization here, but very pro-organizing. And so just wanted to think of that into this conversation, that right at the beginning, something pretty cool. So keep these ideas coming. They will germinate into us, and we will make stuff happen.
Cool, Joe. So next one is Anita. Anita, you're unmuted already. And yep, you can go ahead.
Okay, so this is pretty much along the same lines. You know, a couple of the rounds there, we had some discussion of further, you know, a different kind of group that could meet on this platform, and that there would be some way of bringing people together, perhaps around particular themes, not as an intellectual discussion, but in practical terms. So, you know, Ellen Lewis and I were in the same one when I was saying that I'm now reading pro-social, and she said she's very well versed in that. So that would be a type of group that could happen. How do we, in this group, over a period of time of weeks, so that we can be going and working and coming back and giving feedback and support to each other, you know, around a particular issue. Or it could be people who are actually involved in the same project. Again, choosing a particular way of dealing with that project in experimental terms, if you will, so that we are giving it some structure. So I would really love to see that and have an easier way rather than the kind of scattershot, well, maybe that person is interested, maybe I'll get in touch with them, which has way too much overhead. I think that overhead could be cut out and it could be made more effective.
Thank you, Anita. And next one is Laura.
Hi, I think what I had to say actually agrees with what Anita just said. You know, that I feel like what would bring more coherence to this study group would be, well, first of all, what I want to say is I really like answering the question. So I like it when other people answer the question too. And I think that brings coherence. And I felt frustration when I was answering the question, but other people weren't. Other people were just talking about whatever. So I find that these guidelines are offered in order to bring coherence. Like that makes my nervous system feel good and feel relaxed. So just saying that, and I know you probably hear a little judgmental tone in my voice and all that. So I'm a human who's working it out on how to speak my feelings and my frustrations. So that what would make more coherence to the group is if we follow the directions or the guidelines that are suggested in when we answer questions, when we're sent into our little breakout room, if we stick to the questions. That's mine.
Thanks, you, Laura. And I don't see anyone else that wants to share here. And of course, if people prefer to write on the chat, we will save that too. And I think I'll leave it to Joe for conclusions or goodbye.
Well, one thing we were talking about during the third breakout group was how the last several decades of work on multiple fronts have created a condition of us basically being of like a pregnant woman who's now entering labor. That this regenerative movement, this regenerative economic capacity is being born. And we're in all of the pain and all of the messiness. All of the women who are mothers on this call know what it means to be in transition. When you're at the point where the contractions take over and your body is not in control, you're now surfing on that wave. I feel like that's where we are. And that this feedback that we're getting right now is extremely helpful because I have felt the potency of this study group enabling some of this. Not because of what I'm doing necessarily, but because the time is right. And that this ability to sit in a neutral space relative to people's different organizational roles is a really important space to sit in for this. And so we're all trying to be midwives right now. To something much bigger than us that's trying to be born. And this feedback we're getting now is extremely valuable to learn how to structure and scaffold what we're trying to do together. And this lack of coherence, you know, as I said earlier, this lack of coherence is completely expected at this point in the process. We're holding the messiness. And what I hope we can do in the next maybe the next month or so, as the next 2 webinars happen and as things continue in the study group and the world keeps being the shitstorm that it is, empowering us through disruption, that we can start to be anchors of coherence for a world that is not able to. And that we can use these kinds of honest conversations to help us to be that. And so, just wanted to say that and say thank you, especially to Diego for stepping in and offering this follow-up Zoom call, which is now creating enough structure and coherence that we are beginning to co-create this together instead of it just being whatever I'm creating for everyone. I think it's much more powerful in this way. And so I just wanted to share that and say thank you all. And if anyone has any final comments before we close, I want to just invite that now before we formally close this session. So, if you have something you'd really like to say, I see Laura does, please just jump on in and we'll hear you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I didn't mention the part where I agreed with Anita, which was that I really want to be like I aspired to become, which was the last question, what do you aspire to become? I aspire to become a part of a working group, like a smaller subsection of this larger group that has a particular project that we are working on and we're moving forward with it. So and I understand that there's some designing that needs to happen to understand how that one little project fits in the larger whole, and that's very complicated and complex sometimes. But that is my aspiration, is to be part of a smaller group of people that are working on a project and moving it forward. Yeah.
Thanks, Laura. So Rachel asked to speak on the chat. And I think, Rachel, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, just before we finished, I really felt moved to say and to thank you all, and particularly Joe for starting this group, because I finally feel that, and some other people have said this too, I finally feel that I'm in the company of people who I can resonate with, and I feel like I can finally be myself. It sounds a really strange thing to say, but as the world is going further and further into the shitstorm, I feel like I'm stepping more and more into my power, and I'm helping. It's helping me to understand why I've suffered so much with depression and anxiety over the decades, because I'm a very sensitive person, and I've been trying to fit into the business as usual model, and everybody's telling you, Rachel, you've just got to be this, and Rachel, you've just got to be that. And now I realize that that's exactly what I shouldn't have been doing. And now I'm finally able to be myself. And it just feels so thrilling and exciting to me to meet other people who seem to think similarly. And incredible things are happening in our region now, as we're and lots of women actually really stepping into their power now. And yeah, we've had enough. we want to heal things, and come on, let's get this work done, so that was just something I felt strongly I needed to share from the bottom of my heart. And thank you so much, Joe, for starting this. And yeah, I just want to learn as much as I can to speed up the work that is really taking off now in Bristol. So thank you.
Thank you, Rachel, for all of your continued commitment to not being crazy in a crazy world, which makes us crazy. So I just wanted to honor that, and I can totally relate. And just as you can see, Elise is here saying hello too, because she wants her daddy's attention. So I'm going to go and be a daddy again in just a moment with Elise. But I just wanted to really honor what Laura said before and what Rachel's saying now, which is that we need to start forming these working groups so that we know how to have the roles that are appropriate to us. Like being the goofball is somebody's role at any given time. So you can see that we need to know our roles. Luckily, children don't need to be told. They just know what to do. So yeah, I look forward to co-creating that capacity with you as we start to create structure in the study group. So that's all. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye. Hi, Elise.
So much.
There's Anna also that wants to say something before we go. She raised her hand, and then we have to close.
Yeah, thank you. So first I was going to say thank you for, it was the first time that I joined this following up conversation, and unfortunately I got confused about the time zone, and I came 1 hour later, so sorry. But I found that very, very good to have a way to share and to get in smaller groups and hear a bit of your conclusions and so on. And my father works with the land since I was born, so I grew up hearing about permaculture. And interestingly, so for me, when I hear about you talking about needing to have the course of permaculture, and like, okay, I had books about permaculture since I'm 12, but I never actually did the course of permaculture. And I think that from my perspective, so I grew up in the Amazon as well, and I see that like my role is not on being the permaculture itself, also because I know a lot of, I think there's a lot of structure that's lacking in a way that I remember how my father was broke without, he was very good on doing the permaculture, but terrible on selling it and terrible in making partnerships. And I think there's a lot of not only the permaculture itself, but like a lot of other structure that needs to be there. And I feel myself in other roles more than that, pretty much because of my experience as well. So I was kind of going to address the ones you mentioned on this scale of like backyard permaculture and so on. I think it's actually not only that lane. I think there, like you all know, that there's many lanes. So there was the contribution I was going to make, and thank you very much. It was great, even if it was just a little bit. It was great to know that there's this group, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna. And so, yeah, I think we are closing now, and thanks everybody for being here, and see you soon.
See you soon. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. You want to say bye, Ellie?
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, Elise.
Toodaloo.
Toodaloo to you. Thank you, everybody.
Ciao. Bye.
Ciao.
Ciao. Thank you.
Ciao.
Thank you so much.
Great.
Nice to talk to you.